So, you come here a lot?
Yeah, but not often.
Why?
It's just sometimes whenever I'm feeling in a bad mood, you know, just need to drown myself out.
How's life?
I really don't want to talk about it.
Hello there, nature viewers. Welcome back to another episode of Brady's National Geographic. Today, we obviously will be getting back into the section of, geographic stuff, of course. I mean, come on. Am I really about to stop after only making 2 episodes? I mean, I guess you could say that, last episode, the 4th of July special, I did cover a little bit about the USA. But at the same time, I've done that before, like I said. But, it was 250, so I gotta throw that back in there again. I mean, shoot. I don't really, if I ever make another episode of 4th of July, or I just make, a video in general, I'll talk about it a little bit, but for the most part, I think it will just mainly be about fireworks, because, I mean, come on, here in Independence, for the 3rd time, we understand it now. I think I got my point far enough, so I really don't think that, I don't need to speak on the USA for a little bit much more longer. Anyways, throwing that all out the window, because, I like to extend these intros and outros a little bit too much. I mean, recently I haven't been, but I gotta stop myself before I try to. I'll be speaking on 2 countries, of course, because I feel like these both actually played an essential role in the Vietnam War. Of course, there were, other ones that joined along the way, but these 2 in particular, these both were, some of the biggest ones at the time, and they really made a huge change. I don't think you know how much this really impacted or, really had an effect on the world, or at least the people that were living. And these 2 are Cambodia and Laos. You don't really see a lot happen in Cambodia today, and Laos, well, that's mainly because, in these modern time eras, it's basically an era of recovery, where, they're still trying to get over of what happened after the Vietnam War finally ended, and, their rise eventually fell, and now they have to learn what they've done. Now, Laos, of course, didn't really have too many actions. I mean, the only important factor is that Laos communism group started becoming a little bit more popular, and the CIA began to train anti-communist fighters into, well, of course, the groups. And Laos was bombed over 500,000 times, I should say. Yeah, I know, getting bombed that many times. That just shows you how rough it is. If you thought that World War I and World War II were bad, well, I think it kind of shows that every single war is bad, which is why I said previously, this is why, we should always try to refrain from ever having a war. We shouldn't really try to push it to the point where this happens, because you don't know how many times you're going to take damage, okay? This isn't like a video game where, okay, I mean, you can only get hit this many times, and even when you lose all of it, that's only the amount of times you can get hit. No, it could damage us really seriously, which is exactly what happened to Laos. They got bombed over 500,000 times, and 200,000 of the civilians and members out there of the military died. Twice as many of them, however, were just wounded from the explosions, and not all the bombs actually went off as an impact, and it estimates to about 80 million of them still remaining during that time period. So while they didn't technically have a huge majority, or to the point where they only were left with 1 million left, think about what would happen if those bombs actually did go off, and the percentage of people that survived just from being wounded actually died in the explosion instead. That would have changed a whole lot. The main thing that people remember Cambodia for, even throughout its history, is of course, well, what it ended up becoming though. The magnificent rise of the Khmer Empire, subsequent centuries of regional decline and the French colonization, and the tragic devastation of the Khmer Rouge, which is, what partaken in the Vietnam War. So, yeah, that basically is what they were known for a lot though. Well, maybe you probably would have thought that it was something else, but no. The Khmer Empire exactly started all the way back in the year 802 and lasted all the way to 1431. So that definitely is a lot. That shows how powerful it's become over time, and how much it was applied to. That's probably why America couldn't really do anything about it as much. I mean, even though that they were trying to give them respect though, with all that power that they obtained, it was kind of impossible to do so. Now, the French colonial role is a whole different story, because it's actually when the Cambodia king sought French protection, and this resulted in Cambodia becoming a French protectorate. I hope I said that right. Yeah, French protectorate, and this lasted for 90 years. Yeah, France protected Cambodia for 90 years, lasting from 1863 all the way to 1953, where they finally gained their independence, all because of France. So this kind of shows that, even though that there's some countries out there that, don't want help from another country, or they don't believe that they're trying to help them, there are some that, while they don't really think about it at first, they start to have second thoughts. So, there's not everybody out there was somebody that Cambodia didn't want to rely on. So, hey, I mean, it's interesting to think about the difference between France, not really saying anything to where Cambodia needs their help, whereas USA wants to try to help them, and they deny it. But hey, I mean, that's just what happens though. Like when you start getting, like I said, even though that it still was powerful during this time, it just didn't have a good impact. Now, the Khmer Rouge is kind of what brought it all together, because it was led by Pol Pot, who was in a communist group hoping to restore Cambodia to an empire, since, it went from an empire to a Rouge, but I don't really feel like explaining that. But because of this, during this time, American warplanes started dropping 2.7 million or more tons of bombs on more than 113,000 sites in Cambodia, exacting to a heavy toll among the combatants and civilians alike. And in the end, the Americans pulled out of Cambodia and leaving the Khmer Rouge in charge. Now, the only thing this led to was not something good at all. It led to a mass exodus genocide in Cambodia, which, if you're not familiar with the word genocide is, it's not good at all. It's where, like, one race gets asked to move entirely to somewhere new. An example of this would be the Holocaust. Yeah, and there are also other forms of genocides out there. There's the Armenian genocide, which kind of could have been the inspiration to how the Holocaust also started too. But what the genocide in this was, of course, a mass exodus out of the cities, forcing people to go to the countryside, individuality of all types, and was forbidden, for the family was being destroyed. The middle class, the educated, and the religious people associated with the previous government. And as for this, national minorities all were targeted as enemies. The biggest thing you gotta know about genocides is that they kill a lot of people. They killed approximately 2 million people in this process, while also having re-education camps, which were brought from torturing and brainwashing. So it was really harsh during this time. I mean, I say that a lot, but that's what you gotta know though. Like, every single country at some point had a harsh time where, nothing was really happening, and they were trying to do the best that they can to, stay on ground. But even with this, it's not like it was resulting in any better. It was actually going for something much more worse. And they weren't ready for, what was about to happen next. The next stop after this would be famine, which would be a hard player, and would basically be how this would all end. Because eventually 500,000 and 1.5 million people died by the Khmer Rouge, endured by famine. And by 1977, the Khmer Rouge attacked Vietnam. In 1978, Vietnam invaded, and by 1979, eventually Cambodia won. Which you may think, whoa, I mean, how could they win? I mean, they were bringing all these hard things in there. I mean, I know that they were trying to survive, but like, you wouldn't actually think that, Cambodia would win. Well, they did. In 1979, they finally won, but with that also came, the fall of the Khmer Rouge. And now, to this modern day, it's where, they start to think about, like how all countries do, they start to, try to rebuild their way back up into an economy that actually is, maintaining good wealth and is doing good out there. And not, trying to start any more big wars, because, we gotten over that point to where we shouldn't worry about that anymore. I'll also just go ahead and say this, just so that way, Laos doesn't feel left out, because come on, I mean, I can't call these two, like, the main factors or some sort, even though I guess, like, Cambodia does take mostly a lot of it. But, of course, unlike Cambodia, Laos is celebrated as one of the only landlocked countries in Southeast Asia, and it's known more for pristine natural beauty, laid-back atmosphere, and deeply rooted Buddhist culture. So that really is interesting though, because it also has characterized mountainous terrain, life-giving Mekong River, and historical treasures like Luang Prabang, for example. Now, on top of this, of course, while that's as much as I'm going to talk about for, Cambodia and Laos as a whole, there is this one interesting movie that I saw called First They Killed My Father. And it's about a Cambodian family which revolves around this one little girl who's only 5 years old, who goes through a lot of traumatic experiences, seeing how, people end up getting treated. They have to move, and they have to find some way to live. And it comes to eventually her being, thankful that, she is a smart girl, to where she becomes a child soldier and has to protect Cambodia against, all the invaders around. And this also is another thing that sparks a question about how did child soldiers really, put an effect on the world. But of course, if I want to make a video or episode about that, then I will. Or, if I don't want to, then that's fine. But it is an interesting movie, First They Killed My Father, because it shows, what struggles Cambodians had to do. They all had to feel like, they were equal. Nobody could have, more stuff than the other, even if, like, they already earned it, or, like, they feel like it belonged to them. They all had to feel equal towards each other. And that only just led to more struggles, because eventually in the movie, spoiler alert, but eventually, they do start attacking, and it's hard to watch, like, a kid out there on their own. There actually are 3 kids that are out there on their own, and you know, they're just trying to survive out there. But at the same time, I mean, they're only like what, 10 years or younger? Like, what did they expect to do? Like, that's not good though. I mean, the parents that had no other choice but to send them out there, because you know, if they were seen with a parent, then they probably, I guess, would have gotten hunted down. But like, still, I mean, you know, that's a lot just for those 3 kids to try to do. Technically, I guess, all right, technically there were 5, but 2 of them, of course, had to go 5, you know, because there were more order. But 3 of them, which were the kids, had to, you know, figure their way out of there. And it came to the point where they also had to memorize, you know, what happened to the landmines that were stuck underneath. But eventually, they did make it out alive. And they stood, it was all based on a true story. And I think they still are living to this day, or not. I don't know, I'll think about it. Now here's the thing that I'm catching for today, which I'm going to say as the next episode, is the traps that were played in the Vietnam War. Of course, like I said, you know, there would be traps all around. They're so hidden that like the moment you take one more step, boom, you're already going to be dead. Whether that's because you blew up from a landmine that was covered in leaves, or there was a trap door that flipped open and then you landed on spikes, or, you know, you pressed on a... Even if you try to avoid that, it would hit you right in the face. There are so many brutal ways that you could possibly die in the Vietnam War. And that's why these traps, you know, actually helped to an advantage for a while until, you know, unless you forgot, which at that point, that's just it though. There's nothing else you could do. You just gotta accept your fate. But I'll make an episode next time when I see you guys about skills and your surroundings with a special guest, you know, a professional. At least, you know, I hope he's a no, he's a professional. He's a professional. I shouldn't get my hopes, you know, too down. Because this episode is going to be called Skills in Your Surroundings, talking about a lot of survival instincts that you need to prepare just so that way you're aware of, you know, what's around you. There's only one possible place that we can go. Where are we going to go? Tune in next time to find out. Despite Cambodia being one of the main factors in the Vietnam War, I don't really know if they were the ones that... I don't think they were the ones that started. If they were, then, hey, I mean, maybe I'm probably rambling too much. But they managed to persevere through and win it for their civilians, so that way they didn't have to worry about suffering and, you know, having 500,000 war bombs get attacked on them. So now that they managed to make it through this war, or now that they managed that, hopefully they'll be able to manage any more problems that they have in the future, which they already have been since, you know, like I said, they're rebuilding their economy, just like how, you know, Laos was, making sure that they do whatever they can for the better and not make things happen any more worse. Because sometimes history will repeat, but as long as we leave those big, you know, war parts out of there, then I think we'll all do pretty much fine. Well, thank you guys for enjoying today's episode of Brady's National Geographic. I hope you actually learned something about the Vietnam War. If you didn't, you know, about Cambodia. I probably didn't talk about the entirety of the Vietnam War, but those two I obviously did have to talk about. And just for a recommendation, I do want you, you know, if you can, I recommend that you do watch First They Killed My Father, because it is a really good movie. It's an interesting one at that. I mean, of course, like, you know, I knew that it would probably be dark, but I didn't think it would be this dark to the point where, you know, children have to survive for themselves and, you know, learn how to live, or, you know, learn how to protect themselves now that their parents aren't around. So if you get the chance to see that, then I do want you to, because, you know, hey, as long as you're able to gain something from that, then that shows you what my type of show is, or something. Yeah, and also another recommendation that I'll make is that if you ever feel stupid in life, just know that you're not as stupid as me, because, you know, I think every single cut that you see from this, it has like 18 takes. I'm not even joking. I have to delete a lot of these. I think I'm probably going to have to delete a lot of these. This is going to show as like 20 minutes or something, but when I delete all this, it will show as like 15 maybe. Make sure you subscribe to National Geographic Official, our channel, so we can make it grow more. Follow our TikTok, because that's where most of our shorts come from, and the cameraman's Instagram for whatever reason. I really don't know. And also, you could tell that I've actually been very pleased, because there hasn't been a lot of fireworks out here ever since the last one, even though they kept on going one day after. But one day after is better than, you know, a whole week after that. So, hey, as long as I don't hear any more booms in the middle of my sleep, then I'll be good to go. With that said, I suck at endings. I love stalling these, so obviously make them super long like I have before with that intro or whatever. And this is me, Brady, signing off. And next time you see me, yeah, you really are going to be surprised. But yeah, we'll tune in next time for an episode of Skills and Your Surroundings. It will definitely be better than the forest and camping video, maybe even the wildlife experience. But I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye. So, you often come here at night too? Just leave me alone.